Ark Peter's early life was happy. He was a bright and cheerful boy, full of energy and curiosity. His days were spent exploring the world around him, playing in the fields, and enjoying the simple pleasures of childhood. He lived in Bushenyi with his parents, in a small but cozy home. The family didn't have much, but they had each other, and that was enough. His parents worked hard to provide for him, instilling in him the values of hard work and perseverance. Life was simple, filled with love and laughter. The family shared many joyous moments together, creating memories that Ark would cherish forever. They would spend evenings together, laughing and playing games, their home filled with warmth and happiness. He was a bright and curious boy, always eager to learn. His parents encouraged his curiosity, providing him with books and educational toys. Ark loved to read and explore, always asking questions and seeking to understand the world around him. His parents, though humble, were incredibly hardworking, providing for their son's needs and nurturing his dreams. They believed in the power of education and did everything they could to support Ark's aspirations. They wanted him to have a better life, filled with opportunities they never had. Tragedy struck when Ark was still young. His parents fell ill, and despite their best efforts they couldn't recover. The once lively home was now filled with silence and sorrow. Ark watched helplessly as his parents' health deteriorated, feeling a deep sense of loss and confusion. Both his parents passed away, leaving him orphaned and vulnerable. The loss was devastating for Ark, who struggled to understand why his parents were taken from him. He felt alone and scared, unsure of what the future held. The weight of the world fell upon his small shoulders. He had to grow up quickly, facing challenges that no child should have to endure. Despite the hardships, Ark remained determined to honor his parents' memory by continuing his education and striving for a better future. His mother, Deborah, had one last wish for her son. She wanted him to be cared for and loved, to have a chance at a bright future. In her final moments, she made a heartfelt plea to her brother, Mr. Mwebembezi Milton, to take care of Ark. She pleaded with her brother, Mr. Mwebembezi Milton, to care for Ark. She trusted him to provide the love and support that Ark would need to navigate the difficult times ahead. Her brother listened intently, understanding the gravity of her request. Mr. Mwebembezi, a seemingly respectable man, readily agreed to his sister's dying wish. He assured her that he would take Ark in and treat him as his own son. His promise brought a sense of relief to Deborah, who could now rest, knowing that her son would be cared for. He promised to love and protect Ark as his own. He vowed to provide him with a safe and nurturing environment, where Ark could continue to grow and thrive. His words were filled with sincerity, and Deborah believed in his commitment to provide him with a home and ensure his well-being. Mr. Mwebembezi's home was to be a place of refuge for Ark, a place where he could find comfort and security. The promise of a new beginning gave Ark a glimmer of hope amidst the darkness. Deborah, comforted by her brother's pledge, breathed her last, believing her precious son would be safe. Her final moments were filled with a sense of peace, knowing that Ark would be in good hands. She passed away with the hope that her brother would fulfill his promise and give Ark the life she had always dreamed of for him. Ark was only a child when he was left in the care of his uncle, Mr. Mwebembezi. His parents had passed away suddenly, leaving him in a state of shock and confusion. The world he knew had crumbled, and he was thrust into a new reality, one that was cold and unwelcoming. He was small, innocent, and completely unaware of the betrayal that awaited him. In the beginning, he tried to find solace in the simple joys of childhood, playing alone in the village, trying to make sense of his new life. He clung to his uncle, the only family he had left. Mr. Mwebembezi was his guardian, his protector, or so he thought. Ark's trust was complete, his heart open and vulnerable. He yearned for the love and warmth that his parents had showered upon him. The memories of his mother's gentle touch and his father's reassuring voice haunted him. He often found himself looking at old family photos, longing for the days that were now just a distant memory. Mr. Mwebembezi, however, had other plans. His stern demeanor masked a heart filled with greed and ambition. He saw Ark not as a nephew to be cared for, but as a means to an end. The promise he made to his dying sister meant nothing to him. He had vowed to take care of Ark, to provide him with a loving home, but those words were empty, mere formalities spoken in a moment of weakness. Greed had poisoned his heart, blinding him to the needs of his vulnerable nephew. He was consumed by the desire for wealth, for power, for everything that money could buy. He saw Ark as an obstacle, a burden that stood in the way of his ambitions. He saw Ark not as family but as an obstacle to his selfish desires. The boy's presence was a constant reminder of the promise he had no intention of keeping. He dismissed Ark's needs, his cries for attention, his longing for love. Mr. Mwebembezi had his eyes set on the only thing of value that Deborah had left behind, a rental property in Bushenyi. This property was more than just a piece of land. It was a symbol of security, a promise of a better future. He craved the steady income it promised, the opportunity to enrich himself at the expense of his own flesh and blood. The property represented everything he desired, and he was willing to sacrifice his nephew's well-being to obtain it. Ark's world was filled with sorrow, but he held on to hope, believing that one day, things would change. The inheritance, meant to secure Ark's future, became a source of division within the family. Mr. Mwebembezi, blinded by greed, began to isolate Ark from the rest of the family. He wanted no interference, no questions asked about the welfare of his nephew. He spun tales, poisoning their minds against Ark, painting him as a troublesome child, ungrateful and disrespectful. Relatives, influenced by Mr. Mwebembezi's lies, turned a blind eye to Ark's plight. They chose to believe the fabricated stories rather than confront the truth. Fearful of jeopardizing their own standing within the family, they became complicit in Mr. Mwebembezi's scheme. The once loving embrace of family turned cold and distant, leaving Ark feeling abandoned and alone. He had lost his parents, his home, and now, the support of his extended family. The rental property, entrusted to Mr. Mwebembezi for Ark's benefit, became a symbol of betrayal. It was supposed to be a beacon of hope, a source of stability for young Ark after the tragic loss of his parents. Instead, it turned into a nightmare, a constant reminder of broken promises and shattered dreams. Instead of using the income to provide for Ark's needs, Mr. Mwebembezi kept it all for himself. Every month, the rent collected was meant to ensure Ark had food on his plate, clothes on his back, and a roof over his head. But Mr. Mwebembezi saw it as an opportunity to enrich himself, ignoring the desperate needs of his nephew. He reveled in his newfound wealth, boasting about his status as a landlord, while Ark struggled to survive. The money that should have been used to secure Ark's future was instead spent on luxury items, expensive suits, and lavish parties. Mr. Mwebembezi's greed knew no bounds, and he took every opportunity to flaunt his ill-gotten gains. He denied Ark access to the property, claiming it was his by right. Whenever Ark tried to approach the property, he was met with locked doors and harsh words. Mr. Mwebembezi made it clear that Ark was not welcome, further deepening the young boy's sense of abandonment and betrayal. He refused to share the profits, leaving Ark with nothing. Despite the clear instructions left by Ark's parents, Mr. Mwebembezi hoarded every penny, leaving Ark to fend for himself. The young boy was left destitute, with no means to support himself or pursue his dreams. The property, meant to be Ark's safety net, became a constant reminder of his uncle's greed and the injustice he faced. Every time Ark passed by the dilapidated building, he was reminded of the life he could have had, if only his uncle had honored his parents' wishes. Ark was forced to live a life of poverty and deprivation. He struggled to find enough to eat, often going to bed hungry. His clothes were tattered and worn, and he had no place to call home. The life of comfort and security that his parents had envisioned for him was now a distant dream. He was denied basic necessities, food, clothing, shelter. The very things that every child should have were out of reach for Ark. He wandered the streets, searching for scraps of food and a warm place to sleep, all the while wondering why his uncle had turned his back on him. He was robbed of his education, his childhood, his future. Without the means to attend school, Ark's dreams of becoming a doctor or an engineer were crushed. He watched other children go to school, their laughter and joy a stark contrast to his own bleak existence. Mr. Mwebembezi's actions were a slap in the face of his dying sister's wishes. She had entrusted her brother with the care of her only son, believing he would do right by him. Instead, her dying wish was disregarded, and her son was left to suffer. The betrayal was complete, and Ark's life was forever changed. Years turned into decades, and Mr. Mwebembezi continued to exploit his position of power, keeping Ark trapped in a cycle of poverty and despair. He watched as Ark suffered, feeling no remorse, no guilt. His heart had hardened, consumed by greed. Ark, stripped of his inheritance, found himself alone and homeless. He was forced to wander the streets, begging for scraps, sleeping under bridges, exposed to the elements. He endured the scorn and judgment of others, labeled as lazy, unworthy. He watched as other children with families who loved and supported them, thrived. He yearned for a normal life, for the opportunities that were stolen from him. But his cries for help fell on deaf ears. Section 6. A life upended. Life on the streets was harsh and unforgiving. Ark faced constant hunger, his stomach gnawing with emptiness. He scavenged for scraps, grateful for any morsel of food he could find. He knew the sting of cold nights, huddling for warmth, shivering uncontrollably. He witnessed the dark underbelly of society, the desperation, the violence, the hopelessness. He encountered others who had also been dealt a cruel hand in life, their dreams shattered, their spirits broken. He yearned for a way out, a glimmer of hope in the darkness. But every path seemed blocked, every door slammed shut. He felt invisible, forgotten, utterly alone. Section 7. The weight of silence. 30 years passed, 30 years of pain, suffering, and injustice. Mr. Mwebembezi, now an old man, continued to live a life of comfort and ease, his conscience seemingly untroubled by the suffering he had inflicted upon his nephew. Ark carried the weight of his uncle's betrayal, the pain etched deep within his soul. The trauma he endured left an indelible mark on his psyche, shaping his worldview, his interactions with others. He grappled with feelings of anger, resentment, and a profound sense of injustice. He questioned why fate had dealt him such a cruel hand, why his own family had abandoned him. Section 8. Abandoned and alone. Ark, now a man, bore the scars of his past. He had known nothing but hardship, betrayal, and neglect. He had been robbed of his childhood, his inheritance, his dignity. He stood on the precipice of despair, his faith in humanity shaken to its core. The weight of his experiences threatened to crush his spirit. He questioned the existence of justice, the fairness of it all. He had nowhere to turn, no one to fight for him. He was trapped in a nightmare with no end in sight. Section 9. Hope endures. Despite the unimaginable hardships he faced, a flicker of hope refused to be extinguished within Ark's heart. He clung to the belief that somehow, someday, justice would prevail. He sought solace in his faith, finding strength in prayer, in the belief that a higher power was aware of his plight. He held on to the hope that karma, in its own time, would serve its own justice. He refused to allow his uncle's actions to define him. He would not succumb to despair. He would find a way to rise above the ashes, to reclaim his life, his dignity. He would be a testament to the resilience of the human spirit.